Okay, so to talk about the software lifecycle or the program lifecycle, right? I want you to think to some of the exercises we've done. So when we try to do an exercise, what's the very first step that we end up doing?
Pseudocode?
For that,
We get the assignment.
yeah, before that, there's some kind of a like, this is the thing you need to do, right? So that's some kind of a step like,
Let's see.
identify a problem. Right? Like there's no point in writing code if you don't intend it to do something, right? So first things first, we identify a problem. Then we spend a second,
Researching the problem?
yeah, we spend a second thinking about it, right? So we do some kind of like problem analysis. And then we get around to being like, okay, so this is the method we're going to use to solve it, right? So that's, how would you describe that bubble if you had to?
Wouldn't that be the pseudocode?
Yeah, that'd be pseudocode.
Solution / pseudocode.
Yeah, like development of a solution, maybe an algorithm. So I'm going to call this solution / algorithm / pseudocode, right? So this is that like, okay, I think I know how to solve this problem. I'm going to sit down and like write out some steps that are going to help me write some code. Then what's your next step going to be? Write some code.
We're working our way back to identify a problem.
Yeah, and we are working our way back to identify a problem. So then our next step's going to be,
Refine the code, I imagine?
what's that?
Refine your code?
Yeah, probably try it out, see how it works, right? So that's going to be like, this gets a lot of names. What are some of the names you guys know for this thing?
Flowchart?
Kinda.
Debug?
Yeah, debugging's a good one. Alpha or beta or limited deployment or other words. I probably call this beta test, just to be kind of general. But an alpha release is kind of a really early beta test, right? This really could, maybe most reasonably, this step could be called limited deployment. Right? You're gonna like try it out on your computer or try it out on another computer, or if you were writing an app, right? This would be that, okay, I'm gonna try it out on my phone. Once I've got it working on my phone, then I'm gonna ask like 3 or 4 friends to try it, tell me what they think. Right? So we did this with Chris's Crowball scan. You guys remember that? Like he said, oh yeah, it's looking pretty good. So I was like, can I try it? Right? That's me trying to do a beta test for him. You see that? Okay, then what's your next step?
Polish.
What's that?
Isn't
Polish.
the debug polish?
Yeah, that's going to be in here, right?
Okay,
You're going to
okay.
find a bug, you're going to fix it. You're going to find a bug, you're going to fix it.
Right.
You might, in this step, end up like pushing back a ways. You guys see that? Like, if you've made a major logic error in your pseudocode, you might get to this point before you notice it, and then you might have to backtrack a little ways and redo some stuff.
And wouldn't after debug you go publish?
Yeah, you kind of do some kind of like deploy, right?
Or cleaning up any old code that you aren't using?
That would be debug, right?
Yeah, that'd be in here. That'd be, so this would be also an efficiency step, right? You'd want to make sure your code's running efficiently. You'd want to make sure it's using system resources manageably. Those are all kind of bugging things. And I kind of overstepped my diagram here. Got one more step in here, I think.
Feedback? No.
Yeah, this one's weird. Nobody ever thinks of this one. Gabe, what were you describing earlier? You said something about when I update something.
Add depreciating code?
Yeah, sometimes code gets depreciated. Do you guys know what that means?
I'm gonna take a guess at what it means.
Be my guest. Guess.
All right. Depreciating code, I think would mean like as time goes on, software updates, computers evolve and the code doesn't.
Yeah, the operating system gets updated and then the code doesn't work or something, right? Like, you guys see this every time you get a new software version for your phone, right? Like, sometimes apps stop working.
Yeah.
Or they stop working the same way, right? And then what does the app developer have to do?
Gotcha.
Yeah, they have to like patch it, make it work again, right? They have to do some kind of update. That falls into a step called maintenance, which is oftentimes the most ignored chunk of this cycle, right? So this cycle doesn't have just these steps necessarily. So let me kind of broadly group areas. Sometimes people say this in a different way, basically. So I'm going to say that these two steps here. Oh, great. Where's the trash?
Man, hold it up.
Last time Ben got all upset when I hit him with it. Great, this one doesn't work either. Green?
I was just shocked that I looked down and as I looked up, there's a pen flying at me. That's all it was.
Don't complain. Okay, so roughly we have planning steps, right? And then we have analysis steps, right? And then we have kind of design steps, right? And then we have deploy steps. Oops, and that one needs to be to there. Okay? So depending on where you look for this diagram, sometimes it has these bubbles, sometimes it doesn't have the deploy bubble because they just assume that the step in between debug and maintain is deploy. Right? Sometimes it just has the green ones, so it's phrased as first planning, then analysis, then design, then deployment. Sometimes maintenance will be its own bubble after that. It just depends on where you look. But the idea is find a problem, find a solution, implement the solution, and then maintain the solution. You guys follow that? Okay. So I want you guys to think up the stages in which some examples are. Right? So I'm going to throw some examples here, and I want you to tell me where they live in this. So where does Chris's Grow Balls game live? You guys played that lately?
Not lately, no.
Okay.
Maintenance.
Maybe. Could be. Could be someplace here. Could be. Is it working on your phone? Like, that was his end goal, was to get an app that does that.
Oh, then it's. Yeah.
So where is it right now? If it's his goal was to get it working on a phone, right? To get it to an app that he could sell.
Then wouldn't it still be in code if he's not on the phone yet?
Yeah, so it might be in code, it might be in debug. One of these two stages, right? I don't know whether he's pushed his code from processing into one of the app developer codes, right? So I think he's probably right here. So this guy is where Grow Balls lives right now. At least in my mind. You might make a reasonable case that it's actually in the debug phase. Right, because he's got code that's working, like it's doing something. Let's see. Where does Columbia College's website sit?
Problem analysis.
ID problem.
Yeah, I think it sits in between one of these two things.
Yeah.
Right? Because we should keep in mind, I'm going to do color for this. Okay, I'm just going to write this over here, but I want you all to know neglect is a type of maintenance.
It's not a very good one, though.
Not a good one.
Not a god.
Not a god one. Not a good one at all. Right?
What is it considered if they update something and they made it worse?
Yeah. So
Can't you bug it?
backwards maintenance, right? Maintenance that actually breaks things is another kind of maintenance. keep in mind, right, I'm drawing this like it's a flowchart that has to only go in one direction, right? It is pretty possible for things to take a step back. It's pretty possible for things to go from the maintenance stage to the identify problem stage, or from the debug to identify problem stage, right? It's also possible that this life cycle just stops. Can you guys name a program for which this life cycle is just given up?
XP.
Yeah, Windows XP, right, was purposefully de-maintained. You guys see that? Before Windows XP was purposefully de-maintained, you guys remember what the last one before XP was?
Vista?
Windows Me?
Me.
Why did I know that?
Don't know. Probably because I complain about Windows Millennium Edition a bunch. Windows Me existed for like a year and a half, and it was one of the worst pieces of programming ever written.
But it's Windows, so it's every other.
Every other one is
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
38 was alright.
So I'm going to put the Columbia College website right here, because I personally believe that needs to be redone, not maintained. Right?
They keep trying. They keep making it worse.
Yeah.
They just adapt to it.
Let's see. Where does Google's search function live? Like just the search part of Google, not all the other crap that Google does, but just the search bar.
Just the maintenance.
Maintenance, right? I mean,
Works.
Yeah, they have like cool, today is.
And my question is, are they actively maintaining the Google search bar?
Yeah.
but, I mean, they have those like little like drawings that pop up everywhere, like every day. So sure.
Yeah. They're pretty on it.
I would claim that those are not particularly a sign of maintenance. But they do keep updating that algorithm. The Google algorithm is constantly being tweaked. It's actually a very cool example of what's called dynamics in a map, from a map perspective. In fact, one of the co-founders, Brim, his father is a professor of mathematics at Cambridge, I think. He wrote a very nice dynamics book that actually has a bunch of the secrets of Google's search algorithm in it.
Cool.
So that's Google search, I think, lives in maintenance. How about self-driving cars?
I would say.
Solution and algorithm.
Yeah, I was
sort of
going to say
or
solution
to
algorithm.
code.
They're putting those out. They're getting put out.
they're
They were
coming.
off limit.
Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
Waymo cars in Atlanta and in Phoenix. There's
Tesla released a bunch of those big rigs.
Tesla's got semis driving around in
And do they still get trapped in
SoCal.
circles?
I don't think so. That would be the debug.
Yeah, no,
Like,
they're
they're done.
these are pretty good. I think these would live right here.
No, there was a joke where someone got a car into a circle and it was a one-way passing. They drew like a one-way passing lane, and so it could go in, but it couldn't go out.
Yeah, so there are still bugs, right? They're not in full deployment. They still can't drive in snow. They're still not totally bug-proof, right?
And they can't go, I think, without a person in it. I think they have to have a person in it. No, they can go without people?
Waymo's testing driverless taxis in Phoenix
Wow,
now.
that's
Ooh.
scary. I don't know about that.
Right?
Doors
So-
locked, windows roll.
They seem a little scary, right? But the thing is, they're safer.
Right. I know. but it doesn't
They're
feel right.
extremely consistent at what they do. The accident reports in the Bay, right? Every time there's an accident involving a self-driving car, what part of this process does that feed into?
I would say.
Yeah, that might actually be a like, okay, we found a bug, right? And then we take that bug and go back to the why did that happen? What can we do to stop it? What do we need to update? Is that a hardware or a software fix, right? Then how are we going to actually implement that fix? And then we update the entire fleet, right? Or we don't update the entire fleet. We write some code for part of the fleet. We update 5 cars and see if it fixes it. You see that? So parts of programs get passed through this, right? Like subroutines oftentimes get passed through this whole process. Yes.
I was just gonna say usually it's neither hardware or software; it's user interaction.
Yeah, and actually with the self-driving cars, most of the accidents have been caused by other people doing stupid shit.
Imagine that.
Like there was a big to-do about one of the self-driving cars hit a motorcyclist, right? Like unequivocally, the self-driving car veered into a motorcyclist. Question is, why did the self-driving car veer into a motorcyclist? And it turns out the self-driving car tried to pass someone, but some jackass cut him off on the outside, and so the car reverted into its own lane. But the cyclist wasn't paying any attention, and he had pulled into where the self-driving car had been. And so the self-driving car bumped him. Right? Why? Because he was in this space the self-driving car needed to be in to avoid an accident. Right. You see that?
Yeah.
So then you think to yourself, okay, so maybe I need to identify a problem. Maybe the car needs to decide which thing it should hit.
Isn't there like a whole website that's dedicated to like taking in user feedback for like what decision should be?
That's a hell of an ethics question.
No, I think.
Yeah, these very quickly morph from a like code implementation cycle thing to a like holy shit about philosophy, right?
This is where
Like,
we teach
if
them
it
about
has-
I've seen
morals
this,
and
yeah,
where
yeah.
Stephen Hawking
Yeah.
is working.
If it has the choice between hitting a Geo Metro full of babies and a motorcycle with a 70-year-old man on it, which one does it pick?
Right.
I don't know. It's a hard ethics question, right? Like, at what number of babies in the Geo Metro does it decide to hit the babies in
Also,
the
how
Geo?
does it know that his baby's in the Geo Metro?
Yeah, that's actually a fair point. So one of the things about self-driving cars has been how much should they communicate? And one of the questions is, ethically, should we make them communicate information about their passengers so those choices can be made? And I don't know. That's a hard question. Cool.
My
guess.
my shortcut was always just blare the horn and blame the idiot in front of us blaring car.
Yeah, so the question is, do people make these decisions? And they kind of do. Do they do it in a consistent way? Not really. Should the car maybe roll, like, pick a random, like flip a coin in its head about, maybe, I don't know. Let's see.
Nat 20 hidden babies.
When you see a sweet game on Kickstarter, where does a sweet game that you saw on Kickstarter live in this process?
I'd say beta.
ID, or between maintenance and ID problem before conception.
Yeah, so that might live here, right? Like, just before identifying the problem. Like, the problem they have so far identified is that they would like to make a game.
Oh,
They maybe don't even know what the game is going to entail, right? All the way up to some games have Kickstarter, like some Kickstarter games have demos that you can actually play, right? So Kickstarter things might live someplace in here,
Right in the middle of the entire diagram.
right? Like any place on this side. They might also live in another place, which is the scam phase of this diagram, which is somewhere over there, right? Which is, you don't intend to actually put this into the software development cycle, you just intend to collect people's money and run.
What's
Don't be
called
that guy.
ghostware or a vaporware.
What's that?
A vaporware.
A vaporware. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, a software that's not actually intended for... Nice.
Where do we fit bloatware into this?
That's a fair question. What do you mean by bloatware? Story?
I mean, like, on my phone, I have all these programs that I can't remove, that I don't use, that is just taking up space, and sometimes they just run in the background, taking up CPU, battery life, and Wi-Fi.
Yeah, so the question is, do you know what they're about? Like,
Yeah.
where do they live in this process?
Deploy.
They're deploying the maintenance.
Yeah, I think those things probably live in the maintenance stage, right?
Right.
Deploy is just an instant in time, right? But the maintenance stage, I think those programs, by and large, are doing what they're intended to do.
Annoying.
Does that mean I want them?
So we're actually on ID problem and problem
Get rid of
analysis.
them.
Yeah, so that would be a separate piece of software, right? So for the piece of bloatware that you're talking about, that thing is chilling in the maintenance stage, and that's totally fine for that program's lifecycle. Me as a user, maybe I don't want that thing, and so I would maybe identify that as a problem and then maybe think about a way to go about removing that would be me designing a cleaning product, right? Let's see. How about Minecraft? Where's Minecraft live on here?
Maintenance, I'd say.
Maintenance. It bounces between beta and maintenance probably.
Yeah, actually, Minecraft does a cool thing where they... What? They have a version, right? And then they make an update that's optional that people can beta test, right? And then once the bugs have been worked out, they release that thing. So they're kind of constantly bouncing back and forth between the maintenance, right? Maintenance of the current version and debugging the next version and then deploying it and maintaining that one. You guys see that? Let's see. Where's your final project?
Between maintenance and ID problems.
Yeah. I'm thinking most of your guys' final projects are here. Right? Because you have not yet identified a problem that you're going to solve for your final project. Some of you may be in the problem analysis stage, right? Like you've got an idea, but you haven't really sat down and thought about it much. Make sense with that? Okay. Where does Boston Dynamics sit in here? You guys know what Boston Dynamics
I
does?
do not.
Are those the ones with the robots that keep pushing over?
Those are the ones with the big robots. So keep in mind, this is not the whole company, right? But where does one of their robots sit? For example, the dog robot.
Yeah, they're like the things, and then they always show like the videos of them like kicking them and like
Oh,
closing doors in front of them, and they're like, bitch.
oh, yeah, when the
Black and
when the
white.
nerds are getting.
So do I need to
back
show
and
you guys a video of the...
That
Please
song
do.
is on.
Okay.
The arms.
Alright, so dog robot. What stage is the dog robot in?
Probably beta tests.
Yeah, I think that's sitting in here.
It hasn't been deployed yet, has it?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Alright, they did say that
I don't think
spot
they're
day
a-
was coming soon.
Yeah, I don't think they're available for purchase yet, but they are someplace in this. Do you guys see that there aren't a lot of things sitting in that deployment box?
I'm assuming because that's just a single moment in time when you put it out.
Yeah, things that you guys recognize, right? Things that have been around for like a minute, those are going to be in this maintenance box. The deployment box like really only lasts for just a bare second, right? Because that's like, okay, we're selling these. And then oftentimes that first patch is what?
Day of.
Yeah, the day of release first patch is a shitty thing. That usually means, ooh, we shipped these before they were done.
Patch them. Maybe. 40 gigabyte patch.
The way they sell games now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, games are always sold this way now
Yeah,
because
it's
it
a
takes
thing.
so long to ship the physical discs, right? And that's when you're getting most of your debugging done, right? Like that's when your beta is finally ramped up to scale and like everything's going on. You guys see that? Like you're getting all those results from your beta testing in, but they set a release date like months ago, and all of a sudden, of course, you're behind. Duh. Right? Because they're never going to set like, oh yeah, we'll probably be done with this in 3 months, but let's release it in 7. Nobody does that. It's a terrible business decision, right? You want the hype from those beta testers to still drive purchasing the first day, right? So there's a weird business decision thing that goes into that. Let's see, what were my other ones? Where's Duke Nukem live? The old one, not the,
old
new
one.
one.
Okay.
Okay, as long as we're talking the old one. It's not being maintained anymore.
Yeah, so that one's kind of fallen out of maintenance, right?
Yeah.
Software death.
You
Unfortunately.
guys see that? Yeah, which is really kind of software death. You guys see that? So I think Duke Nukem's up here with the dead thing. Oops, how do you spell Nukem? Right, that's kind of a dead piece of software. Does it still work?
Yeah.
I don't know. It depends on whether you dig up the appropriate hardware, right? Like, is it going to work on this laptop?
Throw it on an emulator.
I mean, I'm sure.
Potentially, yeah, you can emulate it.
Yeah, we could definitely emulate the kind of hardware architecture it needs, right? And then run it. So, Where's the emulator for Duke Nukem in the software lifecycle?
Depends on which one you get, I guess.
Yeah, it probably depends on which one you get, whether it's being actively maintained or whether it's being kind of neglected or whether it's fallen off of the life cycle itself. So soon, there will be emulators to run the old depreciated emulators so you can run Duke Nukem.
Oh dear
Right?
God.
Okay.
Emulator within an emulator. Emuception.
Let's see, Oregon Trail?
That's good.
Where's Oregon Trail live? You guys remember that one?
Isn't it?
Yeah, that's also
I mean,
up
it's
there.
dead, right?
Probably.
Yeah, I think Oregon Trail has fallen off of the
Kind
life
but you get
cycle.
your phone now, and that was in the maintenance style.
Yeah, so there's a question about whether someone's actively maintaining that or not. But I think that's in one of these two stages, right?
Yeah.
I think it's like in between at this point.
Yeah, it could well be in between. It could be that it's being maintained unofficially, right? That someone who doesn't actually own that piece of software is taking over maintenance for it. And that happens sometimes too. So
Ooh, Skywind.
this whole thing, right, is kind of for one piece of software that a company owns. This is not necessarily for a company as a whole, right? A software company as a whole would have what going on?
Many different circles.
Yeah, they'd have lots of different life cycles going for each of their product lines, right? Like Blizzard.
Yeah, I was just gonna say
Oh,
they're
yeah.
all over the place, right?
So Blizzard, for instance, has probably at least 3 or 4 things in the identify problem stage, right? Like they're thinking actively about making new games. They have at least a few things that have fallen off the software life cycle into software kind of depreciation, right?
Like Vikings.
Like
Vikings.
Vikings.
Lost like
You lost,
it's
yeah, it was
old
old.
game.
They kind of sort of brought it back to Trump, I think, but like it started back up.
Blizzard made of Vikings?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was pre-Warcraft.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was like the
So
one of the
I would
first
say that
things.
things that I definitively know have fallen off of the maintenance cycle
The
for
original Warcraft.
Blizzard are like Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2, both of those have fallen off the original maintenance cycle. Diablo 1 has definitely fallen off of the maintenance cycle, although Diablo 1 hilariously got a little bit of maintenance at some point after it fell off the cycle. Does anybody remember that?
No.
I remember it happened. But I
There's
don't know if it
an
did.
expansion pack for Diablo 1 called Hellfire that was actually published by a totally separate company. Blizzard published Diablo, and Sierra Design published
Sierra,
Hellfire.
Really? I thought like they
Yep.
were rival. I didn't think they would do that.
They did at one
Money.
point. It's a nice thing actually. Diablo 2, I believe, has fallen into.
I think they still have Blizzard servers.
Do they still have servers?
Still have Blizzard
So if they still have servers and issue updates, I would call that a maintenance stage.
I think Blue
Uh,
Wars fell off a while, like
StarCraft 1, yeah, I think has fallen
Well,
off.
it's
The
still. They just released it free to play.
Oh, did they?
StarCraft
cool.
1 and 2.
Okay,
oh,
shows
yeah,
what
yeah,
I
yeah.
know.
They remastered it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Brood Wars may have also fallen off, but 'cause I'm
No, Brood War was the expansion for StarCraft 1. It's still.
oh
If StarCraft
yeah.
1's still being
That's right. In my mind, Brood Wars is a separate thing because I just refer to Brood. I refer to it as a different game.
So then, some of their other products are probably in the debug stage. What are things
For
that?
Azeroth. The new expansion.
Yeah, they have new expansions for World of Warcraft or Overwatch. They're in that kind of deploy and debug. No.
In the PTR live right now.
What's that?
I'm just like you were noticing that nothing's deployed. There are very few things in problem analysis. Is that just due to we don't know where they are between ID problem and
Yes! That's exactly it. There are also no things in problem analysis, right? There aren't very many things in solution algorithm pseudocode either.
Because
Because
those are
you-
behind
you
companies'
immediately
secret
go on
walls.
to-
Yeah, because they're not going to tell you about that crap.
Yeah, the secret stuff.
Right? This is the stage at which stuff could be stolen from you, right? So once you've identified that problem, you keep it quiet, right? Because these problem analysis pseudocode stages, right? You don't own anything in there. You own something once you've got code, right? Because you can copyright the code. You maybe can get a couple copyrights once you're in this kind of, okay, I have a solution, I know what it's going to look like. Like I can copyright concept art and stuff like that. That's in this kind of planning, analysis, designing phase, right? But yeah, you're not going to know when a company's doing any of these things.
Yeah, no, it wasn't until like I think the year anniversary of Overwatch that they started showing some of like the problems that they had with the original builds, and they were like showing actual videos of them like going through it and fixing it.
Yeah, so that'd be in their kind of internal debug, right? And sometimes when you're writing a little pseudocode, right, you might wonder, is this a thing I can do? And so you might separate that pseudocode off, that little piece of pseudocode off, and run a development lifecycle on just that portion. You guys see that? So this is way messier than this diagram makes it look. You guys cool with that?
Yeah.
I have a couple examples of things that are in the problem analysis solution algorithm pseudocode stages, and those are those projects I pitched to you guys. Like, okay, I want an Arduino to tell me when the garage door is open. I've identified that problem. I have a pretty good idea of how I want to make that happen, but I haven't written any of the pseudocode for it. So that's sitting right here. Yes, Matt? This other thing about having microphones and whatnot, like, I don't know. I haven't really figured out whether that's a good idea yet. So that might be sitting the step beforehand. Cool? Questions, things? Anybody else got an example of something they know is sitting in one of these? Like rumors of cool software coming in?
The projects in STEM, what's it called? Where
Oh yeah, the weather station project that the STEM students are doing. That's in this algorithm pseudocode stage, or maybe just barely into the code stage, depending on whether Ben's done his homework or not.
What about
it's a problem analysis. I still need to look at it.
See, he hasn't done his homework, so he hasn't written any he hasn't taken the pseudocode we wrote and turned it into actual code, so it's back here.
I don't have anything specific, but what about when they know that there's a problem and they've identified that there's a problem and they're just working to figure out how to fix it? So like old bugs that never get fixed?
Yeah, so those are sitting in that problem analysis stage, and sometimes stuff gets stuck there. It's like, yeah, that's a problem.
Just do this to like get around it for now, basically.
Yeah, exactly. When you call the help desk, right, and they ask you, what browser are you using? Right? That's that there's a bug in their code that they've pushed back to the problem analysis stage and they haven't bothered to fix. Like, they know what's causing the problem. It's the browser you're using. Like, their website doesn't work for Safari or something, right? So they're sitting in this like, okay, we know we have a problem, but they don't know how to fix it, so they just haven't yet. Or maybe they never will. And that part of their code is going to sit in this problem analysis stage the whole time. It's cool, that?